Hello, my name is Scott George. I like to write short stories, and recently I have decided to start this YouTube channel so I could share them as audiobooks. Additionally, in the description, you will see a link to a Substack article and a Medium article that will have the text of the story so you could follow along. So please, if you want to listen, continue, or if you want to follow along, open the Substack or Medium and follow along as I read it. Or you could just skip the YouTube video and read it on the Medium and Substack if you don't want to hear my voice. Regardless of how you choose to experience the story, I hope you enjoy it. A Ravenous Hunger by Scott George. The terrain of Gnestra was a dead crust, gray, cracked, and whisper thin. The soil crunched sharply under Siegfried's boots, each step like a bone snapping in half. The planet's stale, sulfuric wind stirred up whirls of silvery dust, making it appear as if a thick fog covered the land. Rigel's voice buzzed through Siegfried's earpiece. Due to the interference from the dust clouds, his voice was soft and staticky. "Did he catch that?" he asked. "Catch what?" snapped Artemis. Siegfried understood Artemis's frustration. Rigel was overly cautious in his work. He was always hearing strange things in the distance, things that, upon further investigation, weren't there. After many false alarms, Artemis had understandably lost patience with the man. Rigel pointed a shaky finger to his left. "I thought I heard—" "That's just our echo," Artemis huffed. "You don't know that." Siegfried looked at the digital timer on his forearm display. "We'll follow Rigel's hunch," he said, "but if we don't find anything after 10 minutes, we return to the parish. They close their doors in 40 minutes. We'll need to be back by then, with or without our quarry." Siegfried could hear Artemis grumble through the comm. Though he couldn't see her eyes through her visor, he knew they now blazed with indignation. But, like the well-trained soldier she was, she nodded and followed as Siegfried led their small group in the direction Rigel indicated. 10 minutes passed, and, as Artemis predicted, they found no evidence of the unseen. The drab ash beneath them was undisturbed by their strange, jagged track marks. Once the allotted time elapsed, Siegfried ordered his small squad back to the parish. Rigel's hunch, once again, yielded no fruit. Anger flooded Siegfried's consciousness. Not anger towards Rigel, but at this constant failure. Since landing on Gnestra, he had failed to slay a single manifestation of the unseen. He thought of the humiliation and skepticism that would come, of the stifled laughter and subtle sneers that would follow him. Most of all, he worried what the abbot would think. They walked in a sullen, crestfallen silence for about 20 minutes before they could see the dim lights of the parish break through the gloom. Siegfried sighed as he looked upon them. Though they meant food and shelter, though they represented safety from the unseen and the harsh environment of Gnestra, the thought of returning filled him with dread. A raucous din filled the parish's mess hall. Silverware clattered against ceramic plates as soldiers ate. Squadrons more successful than Siegfried's howled and laughed boisterously, flecks of meat spewing from their mouths as they spoke of their recent conquests. Siegfried's group, however, was silent. They listlessly picked at their rice and cauliflower, their bodies and souls too spent to remember how it felt to be hungry. Just as Siegfried mustered the appetite to scoop up a spoonful of rice, he was interrupted by a firm tap on the shoulder. He set his spoon down and turned. One of the abbot's personal aides, a hook-nosed man clad in black robes, stood before him. His voice was high-pitched and raspy. "The abbot would like to speak to you." A dark sense of foreboding enveloped Siegfried like a shroud of sodden wool. His worst fears were now realized. The abbot had finally taken notice of his failure. A sharp ache prickled his chest as he imagined what retribution might await. Most who left the abbot's chambers returned looking forlorn and haggard and wouldn't go back to normal for a couple of weeks. Some, however, didn't come back at all. Siegfried tightened his throat to keep his voice from breaking. Okay, he said. I'll go straight to his office after my meal. Siegfried turned again to his plate, but he felt the man's hand squeeze his shoulder. He wants to speak with you now. A weary sigh slipped from between Siegfried's teeth as he rose to his feet. He followed the man out of the mess hall, a subtle tremor staggering his gait. The chatter that flooded the room died down and was replaced by a silence so sharp it seemed to cut through the air. The eyes of every soldier were on him. Some of their gazes, such as Rigel's and Artemis's, were filled with worry, but most took on a cruel and sinister air. Abbot Kennedy's quarters were dim, lit only by the soft orange glow of the votive candles lined along the walls. He stood in the middle of the room, his gaze fixed on an icon of the Holy Mother. His back was bare, bloody, and covered with a mess of tears and lacerations, some of which were deep enough to reveal tangled masses of tissue and ligament. In his left hand he held a whip, the straps of which were thick and studded with sharp stones and jagged fragments of marble. A violent tremor erupted across Siegfried's fingers as he surveyed the scene. Though Abbot Kennedy faced away from him, his words seemed a direct response to the uneasy look Siegfried afforded the whip. "You know the doctrine as well as I," he said, his voice deep and didactic. "We all sin against the Holy Mother, and we all have cause to rid ourselves of sin. For in the rapture, sin will weigh the wicked down as the Mother raises the righteous to a higher plane. And how do we rid ourselves of the burden of sin, Siegfried?" Siegfried's jaw hardened as the man's condescending tone scraped against his nerves. But the abbot was the Mother's chosen vicar, selected through prayer and holy council to fulfill her mission on Gynestra. Of all the people on this planet, it was he who knew best how to lead the flock. Yes, he was cruel and insufferable. But what right did Siegfried have to question or complain? Siegfried let out a deep, steadying breath to dispel the tension. Still, he could feel his chest tighten with subdued rage. "Through suffering," he answered, his tone flat and placid. A wide, snakish grin spread across the abbot's face as he dropped the whip to the floor. "Through suffering," he said, clasping his hands together. He reached for a black robe hanging from the wall. "Pain purges the soul, expelling the poison of sin from the body. If you know this, why do my whip and wounded back surprise you? Shouldn't an abbot, of all people, strive to rid himself of sin?" Siegfried hesitated. "I've never seen it done in such a literal sense. I usually use a pain simulation." Abbot Kennedy began to thread his hand through the arm of his robe. "Yes, that is technically acceptable. But I prefer the true pain that comes of self-infliction. With it comes injury and disfigurement, a lasting symbol of my sinful nature, a constant reminder of the need for constant penance." When the abbot finished donning his robe, he wrapped it around his exposed, protuberant stomach and sat down. "And I need it more than most, for though I'm an abbot, I am counted among the galaxy's greatest sinners." The abbot gestured to the chair. "But I allow myself to go off topic. Please sit, Siegfried." Siegfried obliged. 5 years ago, the Church of the Holy Mother received stewardship over this planet from the Intergalactic Congress. So, by order of the Magisterium, we came here to establish a parish. It is in this parish that we now speak. You, of course, know the rest. Siegfried nodded. "The unseen." The mere mention of the unseen caused the vein in the abbot's thick neck to bulge. "The unseen," he said through clenched teeth. "From the first night I felt their presence. I could hear their dark whisperings when I slept. I could see them form amorphous shapes in the shadows. They are the creatures of nightmares. From the moment I discovered them, I knew they would become a detriment to the Church's goals on Gynestra." The abbot sucked in a large, protracted gulp of air. His demeanor was more composed when he spoke again. "Do you know why this planet is so important to the Church, Siegfried?" A surge of fury swelled through Siegfried upon hearing the abbot's patronizing tone. But, speaking slowly, he was able to prevent this anger from seeping into his words. Gnestra is only 70 parsecs from Rukovotsva, he said. When properly settled, this planet can serve as a pit stop for those traveling to the capital. With so many people on a church-run planet, the potential for new converts is high. Then you know why it's so important that we rid this world of the unseen, the abbot said, his tone more measured than before. Who knows what type of evil they're capable of? Our settlement can't grow until they're eradicated. I understand, Siegfried said. The abbot paused and looked at Siegfried with an accusatory glare. If so, why is it that you and your squadron have not yet slain an unseen since you've been here? The rage in Siegfried's soul became entwined with a stark thread of apprehension. So, this was the abbot's approach, to accuse him of colluding with the unseen. It wasn't true, of course, but on Gnestra, Abbot Kennedy served as both judge and jury. Here his word carried more weight than the Holy Writ itself. If he believed that Siegfried and his team had aligned themselves with the unseen, it was as good as true. Nobody, not even the heads of the magisterium, would second-guess the punishment he wrought. Well, honored abbot, Siegfried swallowed to steady his voice. It's just as you wrote in your report. The unseen is an invisible creature that, for some reason unknown to us, manifests itself in the form of strange and terrifying beasts, each apparition distinct from the last. They shift in and out of our reality. They appear as shadows or amorphous figures in the corners of our eyes. Often, they disappear into the ether before we can face them. The abbot didn't seem impressed. I know this already. A hot puff of air blew out of Siegfried's nostrils. Yet, his voice remained steady. Then you should understand why such a creature is so difficult to hunt. Other squadrons have found them without much difficulty. The embers of Siegfried's fury flared into a blazing flame. Those other soldiers got lucky then, he said with a subtle growl. How many unseen have you slaughtered, he wanted to add. But, even in his anger, Siegfried thought better of it. The abbot chuckled. Oh, they did? Siegfried was resolute. They were, he said. My squad's failure doesn't stem from a lack of effort. We are diligent in our search. We use everything drilled into us during our training. We follow every hunch and scour every inch of land. But the unseen remain an enigma. No matter how hard we try, they elude us. Abbot Kennedy bowed his head. I'm sorry, soldier. I didn't mean to offend you. I don't doubt your dedication. I know your allegiance to the Mother's Church is strong. Why else would you volunteer to come to this wasteland of a world? I apologize. But you must understand my position. I am the chief clergyman here on Gnestra. It's my duty to protect our small congregation of soldiers, not only from the dangers outside our parish walls, but also from the threats within. Siegfried, have you ever heard the phrase wolf in sheep's clothing? Siegfried gulped. I have. The phrase carries even greater meaning here on Gnestra. Don't you agree? A harsh chill slithered down Siegfried's spine. I don't know what you mean. We've already discussed the nature of the unseen, have we not? We have. And you understand the danger they pose? Of course. Well, with that in mind, I want to share something with you. Since I first discovered the unseen, I've worried that they would one day use their transformation abilities to imitate humans. If they figured that out, they could kill our soldiers, take on their appearance, and infiltrate our parish as, per the axiom already alluded to, wolves amongst sheep. Siegfried found it difficult to speak. It felt as if his breath had been squeezed out of him. All vestiges of anger were reduced to mere wisps of scattered ash. Only the stark chill of trepidation remained. I'm not an unseen, Abbot, and neither are Artemis and Rigel. Abbot Kennedy raised his hands in feigned innocence. I didn't accuse you or your squadmates of anything, Siegfried. But I'll say this, a squadron that can't kill an unseen might make some suspicious. I see something, Rigel whispered. He pointed his plasma rifle to the right, his body quivering as he did. Over there. Do you see it? Artemis scoffed at Rigel's words. Now you're seeing things? Shut it, Artemis, said Siegfried. He's doing more than you. At least he's searching for them. Now come on, let's investigate. The heat of Artemis's glare was palpable, even through the other side of her visor. As you say, sir. Siegfried rolled his eyes at Artemis's petulance. Like a curtain opening for a play's climax, the swirling torrents of gray sand parted before them. They saw nothing new immediately, more gray as usual. But, as Siegfried concentrated on the drab surroundings before him, he noticed a small black specter hidden in the gloom. His heart palpitating with excitement, Siegfried marched towards it, the silhouette sharpening with each step. But, once the figure became clear, a feeling of dread and repulsion overtook him. What lay before them was the grotesque carcass of an unknown beast. Its face looked violent and feral, complete with a thick mat of brown fur, onyx black eyes, and a maw lined with sharp, uneven teeth. Further down its neck, the creature's fur grew sparse and patchy. The exposed skin was folded, thick, and wrinkled. The only exception was the creature's stomach. There, the skin was taut, round, and thin enough to reveal a red and blue web of blood vessels spreading from its umbilicus. Artemis's voice sounded broken and breathy through the calm. Is it alive? Siegfried shook his head. I don't think so. I don't see any rise and fall of the chest. He bent and palpitated the creature's antecubital. There isn't a pulse. What do you think it is? Asked Rigel. Perhaps it's one of the unseen. Then why isn't it moving? Rigel protested. It could be setting up a trap, Artemis suggested. Playing dead to lure us near? No. If that were the case, we'd be dead already. Siegfried nudged the creature to punctuate his point. It remained motionless. How can we be sure that this thing's one of the unseen? Asked Rigel. Perhaps it's native to Gynestra. If it is, we would have seen more like it, Artemis hissed. But whatever this thing is, it died of natural causes, Rigel said. According to the abbot's report, the unseen, Siegfried's teeth ground at the mention of Abbot Kennedy. The abbot never comes out to hunt. What would he know? The anger in his voice startled them into silence. But Siegfried paid no mind to their reaction. Unseen or not, we should take this in, he continued. The abbot won't know the difference. Artemis responded with a curt nod. Agreed. She grabbed the beast's forearm, ready to begin the long and laborious process of dragging the thing back to the parish. It's worth a shot, at least. Beats going back empty-handed. Siegfried raised his arm, halting her. We need to shoot it a few times first, he said. Rigel's voice was strained with panic. But it's dead, he said. Shooting it now seems like overkill. Siegfried shook his head. No. We need to make it look like it gave us a fight. We need to make it look like we killed it. Bringing it in as it is now would look too suspicious. Rigel's calm crackled with the beginnings of a retort. But... Siegfried ignored Rigel and raised his rifle. Then, after a moment's hesitation, he pulled the trigger. A green flash of plasma flickered through the air like a bolt of lightning. When it collided with the beast, its pinkish skin turned a light golden brown while the patches of fur nearly devolved into flecks of soot. A few seconds later, Artemis began to shoot at the corpse as well. As the two continued to rain plasma fire onto the corpse, one of the plasma beams struck the creature's stomach. At impact, the already brittle skin tore. A viscous gush of water and blood spilled from the opening. All firing stopped, and the three watched in amazement. As the stream weakened, a black amorphous blob slid through the opening and plopped onto the ground with a squelch. Siegfried took a cautious step forward and, with squinted eyes, examined the oddity. When the last of the beast's juices dripped off it, the nature of the blob was evident. Though much smaller, it took on the form of the larger creature it lay beside. Rigel let out a hoarse, strangled breath. A piercing shriek tore through Artemis's calm. Siegfried didn't hesitate. He pointed his plasma rifle at its head. We need to shoot this one too, he said. Are you serious? Rigel's voice was nearly lost in the static as he screamed into his mouthpiece. We can hide it and save it for tomorrow, Siegfried said. But it's a baby, Rigel exclaimed. It hasn't even opened its eyes yet. Just let it live. We already have a carcass to present to the abbot. There's no reason to kill anything else. No, Siegfried snapped. We need to do this. Why? Rigel yelled. How can you just callously... Because the abbot thinks we're unseen. Rigel and Artemis fell silent at this revelation. Siegfried couldn't even hear their breathing through their comms. After a minute of stilted silence, Artemis finally spoke. What? Her words were broken by tense, shuddering breaths. What makes him think that? Our inability to kill one, Siegfried answered. He thinks that we might be unseen who killed the real Siegfried, Artemis, and Rigel and took their place. That's what he spoke to me about yesterday. That's why we need to bring this thing in. That's why we need to shoot it. It would be suspicious if we brought one in unscathed. And if we're successful today but not tomorrow, his suspicions might return. We need a constant stream of success. Siegfried lifted his rifle and pointed the barrel at the diminutive figure lying near the still steaming body of its mother. But as he was about to pull the trigger, a harrowing sense of guilt washed over his body. Burning a carcass was one thing, but was he really going to kill this newborn being? Even if it was already dead, it still hadn't moved after all. Was he really going to desecrate this infant's corpse? Siegfried lowered his weapon and sighed. Was he really willing to stoop to this, to stave off the abbot's suspicions? The image of the abbot's thin, serpentine grin came to Siegfried's mind like a newly torn fissure in his psyche. His words, like the eerie timbre of an untuned violin, hissed across his mind. A squadron that can't kill an unseen might make some suspicious. Siegfried lifted his weapon. His heart tightened with guilt, but with a grimace, he pulled the trigger. Abbot Kennedy's quarters seemed alien to Siegfried. An artificial light replaced the orange glow of his votive candles. A table now stood at the center of the room, on which sat the evening meal. Siegfried's plate held the usual rice and cauliflower, but for the first time since landing on Gynestra, a cutlet of golden brown meat lay on the side. The abbot's plate was identical, though his portion of meat was much larger than Siegfried's. Abbot Kennedy's face twisted into its usual, sinuous grin. With the increased light that now lit the room, his teeth now appeared crooked and yellow. I must say, Siegfried, I am very pleased with today's bounty. It is quite amazing to me. First, you and your small squadron were the poorest performing unit in the parish. But today, you bring us the largest manifestation of the unseen we've seen since settling on this ungodly planet. All my squadron did differently was engage in constant prayer to the Holy Mother during our hunt, Siegfried explained. I believe this act alone led to our success. We felt her influence guiding us as we sought it out, and her presence sustained us as we engaged in battle. The abbot nodded. The power of the Holy Mother is truly an amazing gift. It is, Siegfried agreed. I do, however, want to leave you with the following proverb, the abbot said. Of course. The man cleared his throat. Faith and dedication are proven by repeated action. Even the devil himself can occasionally perform a miracle, if it is to deceive. A flicker of trepidation passed through Siegfried's chest. So, it was as he thought. One victory wasn't enough. Two likely wouldn't be either. For the abbot was tireless in his calling, always alert for any trace of subterfuge and deceit. How many, then, would it take to ease that suspicious glare? Siegfried took a deep breath and bowed his head in a simulated show of reverence. Sage words, Abbot. I will keep them in mind, but I will say this. I am confident that our new method will bring us continued success. Abbot Kennedy picked up the knife that lay beside his plate. The object appeared tiny when handled by his sausage-like fingers. That's reassuring to hear, Siegfried. I'm glad we talked. The abbot cut into his meat. A ravenous hunger filled his eyes as he watched the juices drip down the knife. Now, let's eat. Siegfried followed suit and took a bite of his meat. The muscles of his face scrunched at the taste. It was bitter and harsh against his palate. But as the drippings slithered down his throat, he could detect a subtle sweetness tempering the bile. The End of A Ravenous Hunger by Scott George. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this story, feel free to leave a comment and a like, and to share with anybody you think would enjoy this story. Also, feel free to subscribe to my channel. There's going to be more where this came from. Thank you very much, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.